She doesn't miss you at first, not really. In the beginning, she feels relief, maybe even empowerment. There's space again. No more accountability, no more emotional tension, no more navigating the complexity of your presence. It feels light, free. The silence feels like a break, not a burden. And that's because she's still riding the emotional inertia of having you constantly there. Always available, always listening, always giving. You were the background music she'd stopped hearing, the steady beat of a drum that felt permanent. But then something starts to shift. It starts when she has a moment, maybe after a long day, when her first instinct is to reach out. Not because she needs something specific, but because you are the one she used to turn to for nothing and everything. A message she used to send without thinking now sits unsent in her drafts. She hesitates, and that hesitation tells her more than she's ready to admit, because you're no longer there, not emotionally, not physically, not even digitally. Your silence has weight. It has a presence of its own. The quiet starts to sting. This is what most people don't understand. Sometimes the absence of something becomes louder than its presence ever was, because now it's not about what's being said, it's about what's no longer available. Your good morning texts don't show up anymore. Your emotional check-ins are gone. Your support, subtle, calm, unspoken, is no longer woven into her days. She realizes in stages that she'd taken it all for granted. And it's not the grand gestures she misses first. It's the consistency. It's the way you were always there, even when she pushed you away. The way you made space for her without asking for credit. The way you stayed when she tested your patience. That's what begins to haunt her. And here's the thing. She won't tell anyone. Not right away, maybe not ever. Because to admit she misses you would mean acknowledging the mistake. It would mean confronting the fact that what she once dismissed as ordinary was actually extraordinary. So instead, she stays quiet. But her silence is filled with questions. She scrolls through your old messages, telling herself it's just nostalgia. She checks your social media just to see what you're up to. But the truth is, she's measuring the distance between who you were in her life and who you are now. She starts to feel your absence like a phantom limb. What's worse, she starts noticing how rare that kind of presence is. She talks to other men, maybe even dates again, but something's missing. It's not just chemistry, it's depth. It's the grounded, masculine steadiness you carried even when things got rough. Other men offer surface-level charm. They flirt, they try, but they don't feel safe in the way you did. They don't listen like you did. They don't see through her like you did. And they certainly don't challenge her in the way you used to, not by force, but by simply being someone who refused to abandon your values just to keep the peace. And this realization, it's slow, it doesn't hit all at once, it builds over time, until one day she finds herself thinking about you more than she thought she would. Not because you were perfect, not because everything was easy, but because you were real. And real leaves a different kind of imprint. Real doesn't fade quickly. Real sticks around. Especially in a world filled with shallow validation and disposable attention. You weren't another man trying to win her over. You were the man who stayed when others wouldn't. The man who gave her emotional safety even when she tried to sabotage it. And now, that silence, the one she thought would feel like freedom, has become a mirror. It reflects back her choices. It forces her to confront the fact that she didn't just lose someone who cared, she lost someone who saw. And being seen is one of the deepest human longings we have. You gave that to her, whether she acknowledged it or not. And now she feels the loss of it, but she'll pretend it's something else. She'll say she's just tired, just busy, just going through a phase. But deep down, she knows what this is. Because you pulled your energy back, not out of bitterness, not to punish, but because you finally saw your own worth. And that absence, that decision to stop chasing, to stop giving to someone who didn't value it, that's when the shift happens. That's when she starts missing you. Not the version she thought you were, but the one she only truly started seeing after you were gone. And when the silence stretches long enough, she realizes it's not an echo chamber anymore. It's a void. And that void has your name on it. She remembers how you made her feel and not just in the obvious ways. It wasn't about compliments or attention. Those things are easy to give and even easier to fake. What mattered more, what left a deeper imprint, was how she felt when she was with you. Grounded, accepted. Challenged even. You weren't just present, you were attentive in a way that made her feel like she mattered. And for a time, she might have dismissed it. She might have taken that feeling for granted because she didn't realize how rare it was. But memory doesn't always play fair. It surfaces when we least expect it, often when we're searching for something that can't quite be named. That's when you come back, not physically, but emotionally, mentally. That's when she starts replaying moments that didn't seem significant at the time, but now glow with a quiet importance. It's subtle at first. She walks through a familiar place and remembers walking through it with you. She hears a phrase that reminds her of something you used to say, or maybe she finds herself laughing at something only to realize you were the one who used to make her laugh like that. The moment ends, but the emotional residue lingers. That's when the contrast begins to show. Because in your absence, other connections start to feel thinner, not necessarily bad, but lighter, like shadows instead of substance. Because you didn't just make her feel good, you made her feel real, like who she was mattered more than how she appeared. People don't talk about that enough. We're so used to relationships built on performance, on showing our best sides, on curating ourselves to be desirable, that when someone comes along who simply witnesses us as we are, without flinching, that person becomes unforgettable. You were that presence for her, and the thing is, you didn't try to be. You weren't chasing her, trying to impress her. You just showed up honestly, fully, and that created a kind of emotional security she didn't know she needed until it was gone. And now, what she remembers is the safety of being understood. Not coddled, not idolized, but seen in a way that wasn't transactional. And that memory lingers far longer than she'd like to admit. Because it haunts her in moments of quiet, when she's lying awake, when she's scrolling aimlessly, when the excitement of novelty wears off and she's left with surface-level interactions that don't quite reach her. That's when she thinks of you. Not because you were flawless, but because you were solid. And that solidity became a kind of emotional home, even if she didn't recognize it as such at the time. You didn't try to fix her, and that's what made it different. You didn't offer her empty reassurance or lose yourself trying to please her. You held your ground, and in doing so gave her something real to lean on. That's not something easily replaced. Because it's not about physical presence, it's about the emotional echo you leave behind. And the echo of being deeply respected, genuinely listened to, and quietly valued. That kind of echo grows louder in your absence. She starts noticing the difference when she talks to other people. Maybe she opens up to someone new. But the depth isn't there. The response feels rehearsed. The empathy feels conditional. She tries to recreate what you gave her, what she felt around you, but it keeps slipping through her fingers. Because you didn't just respond, you engaged. You met her where she was without losing who you were, and that's what made you powerful. Not force, not charm, but presence. And now she remembers that presence like a light she didn't realize was on until it turned off. It's not bitterness she feels, it's longing. A quiet, slow burn ache that comes from realizing she had something rare and didn't fully grasp it. And maybe she can't even articulate it. Maybe if someone asked her, she wouldn't say your name. But deep down in the private corners of her mind, she knows. She knows she didn't just lose someone she cared about. She lost the way she felt when she was around you. Safe, challenged, respected. That's the thing about emotional truth. It doesn't go away when the relationship ends. It lingers. And in her quieter moments, that truth begins to speak louder. Because no matter how far she runs, or how many distractions she piles up, that memory of feeling genuinely held in your presence keeps resurfacing, and slowly it becomes harder and harder to ignore. Because you weren't just a man she dated, you were the man who made her feel like herself. And that, more than anything, is what she misses now. There's a kind of silence that speaks louder than words, And it's the one that starts to settle in after she walks away from the man she thought would always be there. At first, it feels like freedom. She might even convince herself it was the right decision, that she needed space or change or someone different. There's often a rush of energy in the beginning, a kind of emotional relief. That's common. When people leave something stable, they often do so in pursuit of something more exciting, more dramatic, more affirming in the moment. But underneath all of that, there's something deeper working itself out. Because sooner or later, the absence becomes noticeable. Not just the absence of a person, but the absence of what that person embodied. And what she begins to remember, often without fully understanding it at first, is how deeply you showed up when she didn't even ask you to. How consistently you were there. Not in a needy, hovering way, but in a strong, grounding way. You didn't react to every storm with panic. You didn't demand that she always be at her best. You simply endured with patience. You listened more than you spoke. And when you did speak, it wasn't to impress. It was to clarify, to calm, to center. That kind of presence becomes something she compares others to, even if she doesn't do it consciously. And slowly, she starts to recognize that what she's missing isn't about surface level affection. It's not about gifts or grand gestures. It's about something much harder to define. Emotional patience. The kind of stillness that holds space even when things get messy. Because you didn't abandon her emotionally when things got hard. You didn't try to fix her or silence her discomfort. You stayed and you listened, and when necessary, you spoke truthfully. Even if it wasn't what she wanted to hear. That leaves a mark. Not the kind of mark that shouts, the kind that lingers. Because most people don't do that. Most people jump ship when the emotional temperature rises. They withdraw, they distract, they deflect. You didn't. You remained. And you didn't make a show of it either. You didn't try to get credit for being stable. You didn't use your patience as a weapon. You simply waited. You waited for her to come to terms with her own chaos, and when she did, you were still there. Not because you had no other options, but because you'd made a choice. A quiet, disciplined choice to be reliable, even when it wasn't easy. And now, in your absence, that patience becomes glaring, because new people may seem exciting at first, but excitement is a shallow pond. It doesn't take long to realize how quickly it dries up under pressure. And when it does, she starts reaching backward in her mind, not because she wants to idealize the past, but because her soul recognizes something that her ego once ignored. She remembers the long conversations where you didn't rush to solve her. She remembers the way you absorbed her confusion without becoming confused yourself. She remembers the way you offered stability, not as a performance, but as an extension of your character. That memory becomes a mirror, because the men who follow often lack that inner stillness. They may be entertaining, but they can't handle the weight of complexity. They fold under pressure. They take things personally. They make her feel like her emotions are burdens rather than opportunities for connection. And in those moments, those deeply human moments where she longs to be held in something strong and unshaken, she thinks of you. Not because you made her life perfect, but because you made her feel safe to unravel without fear of rejection. And that safety, once experienced, becomes something she can't unknow. She can't pretend she didn't feel it. She can't erase the emotional contrast it creates in every new connection. Because you didn't just show up when it was convenient. You stayed when it was uncomfortable. You endured emotional storms, not because you enjoyed them, but because you understood that love is forged in pressure, not fantasy. And that understanding, that strength, is rare. It's so rare that when it's gone, it leaves behind a silence filled with questions she can't answer. She begins to ask herself if she mistook calmness for boredom, if she confused stability with stagnation, if she underestimated the strength it took to simply be present with her while she figured herself out. And those questions start to erode the confidence she had when she left, because she begins to see that patience isn't passive, it's powerful, it's deliberate, and it's almost impossible to replicate once it's been lost. So when she finds herself staring at her phone, tempted to reach out but unwilling to break the silence she created, when she lies awake at night retracing memories that used to feel so ordinary but now seem irreplaceable, that's when the truth hits. She didn't just miss you. She missed the version of herself that could exist in your presence without fear, because you gave her room to breathe without demanding she shrink to fit your expectations. And that, more than anything else, is what makes her realize she didn't just walk away from a man, she walked away from a sanctuary. When a woman starts to miss the man she once took for granted, there's often a moment, small and easily overlooked, when she sees him thriving without her. And it stings, not because she wanted him to suffer, not because she bears him ill will, but because something primal in her realizes that he didn't collapse in her absence. He didn't spiral into despair or chase after her with desperation. He recalibrated, he recentered, he got stronger. And that image, that quiet, undeniable proof of his self-sufficiency, becomes the spark that ignites the slow burning ache of regret. Now, people don't like to talk about this part. It's easier to tell stories about toxic exes or dramatic breakups than it is to sit with the discomfort of seeing someone we once dismissed become better without us. But the truth is, for many women, this realization doesn't come immediately. It doesn't come during the first days of separation, when emotion still clouds perception. It comes later, when the dust settles, when the noise fades, and when she begins to notice that he isn't in the same place she left him. Because you see, when someone truly grows after a heartbreak, when they take the pain and convert it into discipline, purpose, and clarity, it sends a signal that's impossible to ignore. It challenges the narrative she may have told herself to justify the separation. It contradicts the subtle hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd crumble without her. Because now he's not just okay, he's becoming more. And that contrast between who he was when she left and who he is now becomes a mirror she didn't ask for, but can't look away from. And let's be clear here, this isn't about manipulation or posturing. It's not about pretending to be fine just to provoke a response. That kind of performance is thin, and people can see through it. No, what she responds to is something much deeper. It's the authentic transformation of a man who faced abandonment and chose not to be defined by it. A man who didn't use his pain as an excuse to retreat into bitterness, but instead used it as fuel to rebuild himself into someone more resilient, more focused, and more aligned with his purpose. And she sees that. Maybe it's through mutual friends, maybe it's through social media, maybe it's just in the way he carries himself when they happen to cross paths, but she notices. She notices that he no longer carries that subtle weight of trying to win her back. She notices that his smile is genuine again, not forced, not brittle, but grounded. She notices that he's not trying to prove anything to anyone. He's just moving forward. And that's the moment it starts to get to her. Because women are intuitive. They may not always articulate what they're feeling, but they know when something has shifted. And when they see a man becoming more without them, they begin to question the decision to leave in the first place. Not out of possessiveness, but out of the recognition that what they left behind was something far more valuable than they initially understood. It's a humbling moment, because she starts to remember the quiet strength he offered, the patience, the way he gave without keeping score. And now, in his growth, she sees that none of that was weakness. It was strength she mistook for passivity. And the irony is brutal, because now that she sees it clearly, it's no longer hers to have. That's when the ache becomes real. And there's a reason that ache is so persistent. Because when a woman sees that a man is leveled up without her, she doesn't just miss who he was, she misses who he's becoming. She misses the future she could have shared in. And that sense of loss is more profound than nostalgia. It's a recognition that the story she wrote in her head no longer matches reality. That he didn't just survive her absence, he transcended it. And make no mistake, this kind of man, the one who rises instead of recoils, becomes increasingly rare in her eyes, because once she's seen it, she can't unsee it. And that's the cost of taking someone for granted. You don't just risk losing them, you risk watching them become the best version of themselves without you. So when she scrolls through photos and sees that quiet confidence radiating from his posture, when she hears through the grapevine that he's doing well, not just professionally, but emotionally, when she notices that the sadness in his eyes has been replaced with clarity and peace, that's when the missing starts. That's when the weight of the decision truly lands. Because she didn't just lose the man he was, she lost the man he is now, and the man he's still becoming. It's strange how often we don't truly value something until it's no longer within reach. We all know this intellectually, but emotionally, it hits like a wave when it finally sinks in. And one of the clearest moments that a woman starts missing the man she once took for granted is when she reaches out and he doesn't respond the way she expected. Or maybe he doesn't respond at all. And that silence, that absence of eagerness on his part, speaks louder than any words ever could. Because here's the truth. When someone has been taken for granted long enough and they finally step away, something within them shifts. It's not just that they stop chasing, it's that they start seeing themselves with different eyes. And the moment they reclaim their dignity, their self-respect, their internal strength, is the moment they stop being emotionally available to the person who overlooked them. And that's when the dynamic turns. That's when the woman who used to assume his attention was permanent begins to feel the weight of its absence. You see, it's not rejection that stings the most, it's indifference. It's realizing that someone who once prioritized you no longer orbits around your validation. And that feeling is powerful, because now she's the one wondering. She's the one replaying her messages. She's the one replaying the last conversation, trying to understand what changed. But it's not a mystery. What changed is that the man she took for granted finally stopped offering himself where he wasn't valued. And the space he left behind starts to feel impossibly loud. It's not that he's being cruel, it's that he's grown. He's learned that his time, his energy, and his attention are not infinite resources to be squandered. And in stepping back, he's not punishing anyone. He's just choosing peace over confusion, self-respect over pleading. And in doing so, he becomes less accessible, not out of spite, but out of clarity. And she notices that. She feels it in ways she didn't anticipate. She might try to casually reconnect, maybe through a neutral message, a subtle comment, or an old inside joke. But when he doesn't react the way he used to, when he's polite, maybe even kind, but no longer emotionally tethered, something shifts inside her. Because she realizes that the door she once assumed would always be open is now closed. Or worse, it's open, but he's simply walked through it and kept walking. And that's when the missing begins. Not in the fireworks of a dramatic fight, not in the heat of anger or pride, but in the slow realization that someone you thought you could always return to simply isn't waiting anymore. Because here's the secret most people don't understand about men who have been taken for granted. They don't stop caring overnight. They usually hold on far longer than they should, giving chance after chance, waiting, hoping. But once they reach the point of emotional detachment, once they've mourned the connection in private and let go of the fantasy, they don't return. Not because they hate, but because they've healed. And a healed man is not the same as a hurt man. A hurt man might argue. He might plead. He might try to fix what's broken even when he's not the one who broke it. But a healed man walks away quietly. He doesn't need closure. He doesn't need explanations. He just knows what he's worth now, and he acts accordingly. And that absence, that lack of effort to re-engage, that's the silence that echoes in her mind. That's when she begins to wonder what he's thinking, where he's going, who he might be with now, not because she's possessive, but because she realizes too late that what he offered wasn't ordinary, that his loyalty, his patience, his love, it was rare. And now that he's no longer offering it to her, she sees its value with painful clarity. It's a hard truth, but one that must be faced, because the greatest consequence of taking someone for granted isn't that they leave, it's that they evolve. They become someone stronger, wiser, less available. And once you've seen that transformation, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to who they were. You have to accept who they've become and the possibility that who they've become no longer needs you. And so when she reaches out and finds only silence or distance, when she tries to step back in and realizes she no longer knows the man she once thought would always be there, that's when she starts to miss him. Not just who he was, but who he is now, and who she no longer gets to witness up close. That is the moment she feels the true weight of what she lost. There's a moment, often unspoken and quietly haunting, when a woman starts to remember not just the man she let go, but the version of herself she was when he was present. It's easy to focus on the man, what he did, how he treated her, what he offered. But over time, something deeper begins to unravel. It's not only the absence of the man that causes her to feel the ache, it's the recognition that when he left, a part of her that existed only in that dynamic went with him. And that version of herself, the one who was deeply seen, consistently supported, who felt safe enough to be soft, doesn't show up the same way anymore. You see, we often underestimate how relational dynamics shape identity. When a man brings out the grounded, feminine, radiant side of a woman by simply being steady, honest, and present, she begins to show up in ways that surprise even her. She feels more alive, more expressive, more creative. Not because he completes her, but because his energy gives her the space to be fully herself. He's not crowding her. He's not controlling her. He's not demanding performance. He's simply there with clarity, with calm, with consistency. And when that kind of presence disappears, it leaves a vacuum. Not just emotionally, but psychologically, because the environment that supported her best traits is no longer there. And over time, that loss begins to show. Not in the dramatic ways we often expect, but in subtle shifts. She's not laughing as much. She's not dreaming as freely. The sparkle, the sense of ease starts to dim. And it's in that slow, quiet fading that she begins to truly feel his absence. Not just because she misses him, but because she misses herself when she was with him. It's disorienting because people will say, just move on, you'll find someone else. But it's not that simple. It's not about replacing the man. It's about trying to recapture a version of herself that only came alive in that specific emotional landscape. And even if she tries to manufacture it elsewhere, it often feels hollow. The connection wasn't about surface traits, it was about resonance, about the way his grounded presence called her deeper into her own. This isn't something that's easy to articulate, because on the surface, everything might look fine. She's functioning, she's busy, she's distracted, but inside she's grappling with the echo of who she was in his presence. Not because she lost her identity, but because she had briefly glimpsed her fullness. And now it's harder to find. And this is why she begins to miss him in a way that doesn't make sense logically. Because what she really misses is the internal harmony that his presence helped cultivate. He didn't fix her. He didn't save her. He didn't even necessarily do anything grand. He simply was. And in being steady, he allowed her to soften. In being consistent, he gave her freedom. In being rooted, he gave her permission to rise. When that's gone, she can try to numb it. She can date casually, keep herself busy, convince herself it wasn't a big deal, but the body keeps score. The heart keeps track. And eventually, when the noise quiets, she starts to feel it again. Not as a loud, dramatic pain, but as a soft, aching nostalgia. A longing for the version of herself that felt most alive, most seen, most secure. And that's when it hits her, not just that she misses him, but that she didn't fully recognize the value of the space they shared. She may have thought he was just another good man, but now, in retrospect, she realizes how rare that energy was, how it made her better, how it brought out a grace, a rhythm, a lightness she struggles to find without him. That's the turning point. Not when she misses his jokes or his presence or even his love, but when she misses who she became in his presence. That's when the depth of the loss becomes real, because she didn't just take him for granted. She took for granted the sanctuary that existed between them, the unspoken understanding, the unforced flow, the sacred ground of mutual respect. And by the time that realization settles, the door has